China, you've probably heard them in the news a lot in America this year, the Trump administration, and America is doing everything it can to get its hand on these raw materials because, like gallium, 98% of the world's gallium is coming from China.
Welcome to another great episode of Dre and Smiley, The Inner Circle.
Dre, today we have a guest that's in a fascinating business. Have you ever pondered rare earth metals, rare earth minerals?
I have.
You have? When?
Well, geology, when I was in school, we took geology, that type of thing. Outside of that, no.
Well, when I started thinking about it was during Black Panther, the Marvel movie, where they had
Yeah.
vibranium, and vibranium was the superpower, and that was what Captain America's shield was made out of, was vibranium. So that's where I thought about rare earth metals. And then of course you hear about all the lithium and the uranium and all that different stuff we're trying to get out of the ground. Our guest today specializes in investing in strategic metals, and he's the first global marketplace for private investors to own rare earth as physical assets. Lewis, welcome to the podcast. And if you can, just define what are rare earth metals and what makes them rare.
Well, thanks very much, Dre and Smiley, for having me here. In fact, both of you sort of nailed it at the beginning. When people hear of rare earths, that's pretty much what everybody thinks of. But we'll be taking a deeper sort of a dive today because you also mentioned base metals like lithium, and people will know about that stuff. But the rare earths are different. We work they're sort of a niche category. Rare, obviously, implying they can't be found in abundance. But I suppose what really distinguishes them from normal metals is they never occur naturally in the Earth's crust. So they're always a byproduct of another raw material. And what's most interesting about them is they're only produced in very, very small volumes. And you said something at the beginning, Smiley, that is a very good analogy of them, right? You mentioned like that sometimes during this production, you're taking notes and you said, I might be texting. Don't worry, I'm not texting my girlfriend or whatever. I'm actually taking notes, right? Well, while you're swiping your screen, you're touching indium, which is one of our rare earths. And you could profit from owning that metal. And it's only represents maybe 0.01% of the makeup of an iPhone, but you can't swipe your phone without it. So these are the ones we're talking about. They're a niche product. They're sort of, I suppose you could say they're the backbone of manufacturing in the 20.
Where do you say they're a byproduct? Like, is it a byproduct of oil? Oil creates natural gas. Is it cadmium, or what type of rare earth metal or what type of metal, like iron ore? I'm from Pittsburgh. Does steel create one of these little 0.001% of some new metal, or how is it a byproduct, or what kind of
Yeah,
byproducts?
yeah, great question. So one example, hafnium, right, which is a byproduct of zirconium mining. For every 50 tons of zirconium, you only get 1 ton of hafnium. Now, hafnium is a super alloy in jet engines and rods for nuclear reactors, also space technology, and it's unsubstitutable. So you only get like 60, 70 tons of hafnium a year, but like Boeing, Airbus, all these aircraft manufacturers, it cannot be substituted. It can withstand extremely high temperatures and still function. But the broader answer is, all sorts. Like gallium's a byproduct of aluminum, rhenium's a byproduct of a byproduct. So it's a byproduct of molybdenum, which is a byproduct of copper. So they used to be waste materials, believe it or not. We had no use for them until the 1960s when we went from black and white TVs to color TVs, and they were used in the screens. But where they really took off is in the 80s and the 90s with computers. So they're technology metals is another good word for them as well.
Nice. So, Lewis, tell me this. Tell me the story behind you getting into strategic metals invest. Were you hanging out with some buddies, playing golf at the bar, and they realized, you know what? There's an opportunity out there. We got to pursue it. How'd this come about?
Probably, I just got lucky and I was probably being nosy, which in Ireland means, I was probably not minding my own business. I overheard the conversation, and my ears picked up, as you can see. I've got the big enough ears. But I was actually at a conference in America, believe it or not, in It was called the New Orleans Investment Conference, and it's apparently the longest running mining and metals conference in the US. Now, it's mostly about mining, but I heard somebody talking about a German company, and I'm from Europe, who their core business, and this is very important actually in relation to private investment. I work with private investors so people can profit from it. But that's not the most important thing, really. When I say we, there's three sort of facets to the business, and our core business is not private investment. Now, that might sound like I'm sort of contradicting myself a little bit, but the truth of it is it's not, because our core business is we're in Central Europe, we're in Frankfurt, we have an office of 45, 50 people, and 85% of the people in the office, what we're doing is we're buying these metals, mostly from China. You've probably heard them in the news a lot in America this year, the Trump administration, and America is doing everything it can to get its hand on these raw materials, because like gallium, 98% of the world's gallium is coming from China. You know, Ford Motor Company had to stop production on one production line this year in April when China started. You've probably seen it in the news, you know, that, you know, in fact, when President Trump went on his trip to the Far East, like about a month ago, every single country he was in, he spoke about rare earths: Cambodia, Thailand, Japan, South Korea, and then China. And although he came away, and forgive me for saying this, I'm Irish, I'm not an American citizen, but politicians always want to sound like they came away with a win. He didn't really come away with a win. China has the upper hand here. They produce more than 90% of these rare earths. And that's where we come in. So our core business is we buy them mostly from China, but wherever we can get them. And then we sell them to manufacturers. So we're a tier one supplier to, you know, I won't mention them because we don't often do. I would if somebody wants to do due diligence, but like Japanese electronics manufacturers, German car manufacturers. So that's our core business. And if that wasn't our core business, I'd have no business being here today talking to you about private investment. Because, like, let's say, Dre, you wanted to buy some gallium and you said, Louis, ship it over to me here in North America. There's no point in you having it, you know, hidden out in the backyard, or, you know, or sitting on the desk.
No.
There's, you know, who you going to sell it to? You can't just call up Boeing and say, hey, I've got some gallium. They'll only deal with reputable people. So we keep 20% of our business open to private investors, which means what you're doing is we're inviting you to participate in the supply chain with us. We guarantee you get industrial grade, you know, gallium, you know, 99.999% purity, let's say, for example, because we know what Boeing needs. We know what Airbus needs. We know what Siemens need. We know what Apple needs. So we know what the industry demands. Then we have a distribution logistics platform where we've over 300 metric tons of rare earths. It's the largest inventory anywhere outside China. So you become a part of that distribution and logistics platform. You store them there, pay 1% a year for storage, for insurance. And then when you're ready to liquidate, we will then mediate a sale to a manufacturer or one of our clients, or we buy them for our inventory.
Okay, so let's peel the layer back on this just a bit, Lewis. So, for the unseasoned rare earth metals investor, it sounds like it makes perfect sense, right? You're investing in these physical objects, right, which are stored in a physical location, and you're guaranteed that the quality is at this level. But let's say I'm someone who's accustomed to investing in, I don't know, real estate, right? I know I can fly over to Tampa, Florida, and look at my 50-unit building and check it out, make sure it's okay. Not only am I getting the money on a regular basis, but I can go look at this. Walk me through how you would talk to someone about, listen, this is a good investment for these reasons. Although you can't go visit it in the bunker that we store it in, here's why you want to consider investing in something like this.
Yeah. You know, it's a great question, Dre, you know, and you've sort of asked and answered a lot of questions that we've been asking ourselves for the last 5 years, because our business has just grown phenomenally in the last 5 years. And up till 2020, we only had partners in the German speaking region of Europe. I'm Irish, but we're based in Frankfurt. So Germany, Austria, Switzerland. But the business has literally doubled on the industry side every year for the last 5 years. We turn over 300 million this year. So we're now growing internationally. That's one of the reasons I'm talking to you. Now, I'm mostly talking about private investment, and I don't want to confuse people by talking about a second thing, but we're also looking for partners we're looking for a partner in each country, you know. But what you said, like, is very true, and you put it very diplomatically, like unseasoned, right? You're absolutely right. Nobody has a clue about these metals from at the beginning. All of my clients have really never heard of them. So, we go into this period of information gathering, but you are invited to come to Germany. You can come to the vault. Of course you can. I mean, before, during, or after. Not all of our clients do, but when they do, they spend a full day with us. Well, half day at the vault. Or for lunch, we take them to this nice classic Porsche museum, which is a restaurant as well. And then we go to the office, 45, 50 staff. I'm sure I've had clients, I started I was an investor first in 2017. And then I became a partner for Ireland, UK. And for some reason, 80% of my clients are coming from the US. But we probably will have partners in the US next year. We've three people, some ex military veterans came over, ex Navy SEALs actually, who we think are going to sign up. And we've got some other people who are into metals. And the reason for that is it's like these metals are just um, it's only when you start hearing about them in the news that investors start thinking about them, right? It's only because they're in the news now in the daily cycle, people are Googling gallium and where can I get gallium? So, you've really, it's a niche product, and you're right about that. I mean, I would still buy real estate before I buy metals. They're not first or second or even third on everybody's list. But when you see the numbers, because when there's what we call scarcity driven price increases, they're profitable. I mean, that's the whole point, right? I mean, I can tell you now, and anybody listening, who's an engineer or an analyst or willing to do the work, if you look at the historical prices, none of our private investors have lost money if they hold them for a minimum of 3 years. So we tell clients in a very frank and sincere way, please don't buy these metals unless you're going to keep them for at least 3 years, 5 years, even better. And we don't want day traders, and we don't want people thinking it's like crypto, and we don't want people calling us every week about the price. We sort of want to get somebody to go from being unseasoned to seasoned, and we'll introduce them and educate them along the way. But it is a great question. And I know I've had clients who didn't buy from me who went, hold on a minute, there's this guy and he's Irish somewhere. He's in Tipperary in Ireland and he wants to sell me metals in a vault in Germany and I'm in California. And most of them are very polite and just say, no, the wife said I can't do it. Like,
Right.
it is a very, very valid question and people have to do their due diligence. And it still is a niche product. But like, let me tell you, all of my clients, listen to this, right? In April, China stopped the export of dysprosium and terbium to America in retaliation, right? Dysprosium's gone up 122% since April. So we're now offering clients, anybody who bought in January, February, we're asking to buy it back from you at 122% higher than you paid because there's a shortage. So there's a real story to be investigated if people are willing to do the work, and we're willing to invite them in and give them, we have a due diligence portal and we give you the password, and we like to get to know people a bit first to make sure just, that we sort of, not that we would refuse a client, but well, that we would. I've refused a couple of clients because I know they'd be a pain and, you know,
Makes
it's not,
sense.
we have let me say it more diplomatically, like Dre would. We have a winning investment strategy, and if you're aligned with it, you're very welcome to join us. And if you're not aligned, please don't buy.
Makes sense. My last question, I'll kick it over to Smiley here. So, with China controlling 90% of the processing of these types of metals, what does that mean for the rest of the world if there's a trade war of some sort and they say, you know what, this is it? Does that just kind of, obviously for you, your prices will skyrocket. So that's a plus for those that have invested. But what does that mean for the rest of the world? Does that mean that technology is going to go dark? What are the ramifications that you see of China decides, you know what, we're not going to process anymore?
Yeah, no, that's exactly where we are right now, Dre, which is, you know, in the 1980s, the US was producing more rare earths. China was maybe producing 12%. And I think basically China understood before Europe and the US that these raw materials would be, you know, key to economic prosperity and also military capabilities in the 21st century. And what they did, there was a mine in California called Mountain Pass that China invested in. sort of took it over and moved all the processing to China. Um, Europe allowed it to happen. America allowed it to happen. Why we basically exported our pollution to China. And remember, in the 80s, we were in this age of globalization, right? And they sort of said, look, the Chinese will do it cheaper, obviously maybe not as sustainable, but we get them cheap from China. And that's what happened. And that's why we got to where we are today. However, now we've realized this is a big mistake and we're moving from globalization to, let's say, de-globalization. Another word might be resource nationalism. So the question you just asked me is exactly the status quo today. Europe and everywhere else has realized that they have to wean their dependence off China. America is going to throw money at it like it usually does, and America will probably solve it, but it'll take 10 or 15 years. And that mine that I mentioned to you, a Mountain Pass in California, it's now called MP Materials. And if you Google it, you'll see that the US Department of Defense just invested $400 million in this company and has become its largest shareholder. There's also an offtake agreement in it, which means the US Department of Defense will take everything they produce and they're guaranteeing them double the price for 10 years. America realized, and way quicker than Europe, because we're, to be honest, we're clueless over here. We've 27 countries in one union. We don't know what we need. We don't know where we need it. But America has, because also, despite the name, they're not always rare, but because they're a byproduct, they have to be extracted, and it's the processing that makes them expensive. They have to be extracted and separated and then remetallized into high purity levels. And this company, the US, has invested in MP Materials, are building a processing plant which will be ready. Sorry, I'm finally answering your question. I'm Irish. Once we get started, it's hard to get us to stop, But answer your question. MP Materials is building a plant, the first plant in the US that will be able to process them, into magnets for phones and for cars and for wind turbines, etc. That will be in full production in 2028. It'll be the first one in America, but America needs hundreds more like that. So we're 10 or 15 years away from solving the problem.
What about this? Let's say getting to the business side of the rare earths. Let's say I'm an investor and I got 10,000. I come to you, Lewis, and I say I want to invest 10,000. Do I invest it in one particular metal or is it like a mutual fund? I just say here and I get a basket of metals. How does that work?
Great question. Yeah, either or. Smiley, you can, we will get you, like our website is purely educational. Like we're not really salesy at all, or we try not to be. If you go and Google gallium, like you could really learn all about gallium in an hour, right? And, some people might like a particular industry. Like, for example, strategic metals is the name of my company. It's an umbrella term, really. It's not an academic term, but that means the same metal could be a technology metal, defense metal, energy transition metal, medical devices. They all have multiple applications, and we'll help you get an education on it. But you can buy one, again, to answer your question, you can buy one, or you can buy a basket up to, just something very important though. On the industry side of the business, we sell about 45, 50 metals to industry, like to BMW or stuff like that, right? But we only offer about 8 or 10 metals to private investors because not all of them are relevant. Some rare earths are as common as copper. So out of 17 rare earths, we only offer 4 to private investors. And out of 50 that are listed on the the Geological Survey as critical to America's economic prosperity, we only offer 8 to 10 of those. And what's the characteristics that determine they get on, that we think they're relevant, that you'll make money off them, is 4 things. 1, they're the most in demand. 2, they're the least produced. 3, there's usually what we call a supply concentration risk, like China usually comes up. And lastly, which ones have the most application? So if they fit into that category, we offer them we deem them relevant as a physical asset.
When you talk about China and the US, how does the continent of Africa come into play with its vast land mass? And are there players in the rare earth discussion?
Yes, Africa would be rich in resources. South America as well. I don't know why North America is sort of a north ignored. China's already in Africa though. But you know what's happening, which is great, I think, Smiley, is we're moving into an age of resource nationalism. Like I've gotten sort of emails and messages from people in Africa and talking about mines and this, that, and the other. And I might be able to refer to them onto the right people. But what's happening is countries have woken up to the fact that they need to try and stay as independent as possible because they want to move up the value chain. Countries in Africa, Vietnam as well, for example, they are saying, well, yeah, come in and partner with us, but we'll start processing you as well. That process is beginning, but it's just going to take a while. I mean, it involves a lot of investment, and China's about $1 trillion and 25 years ahead. So that's why it's going to take 10 to 15 years. Some people think it'll take 5 years, but there's just no way. There's no way. It'll take time.
So you mentioned that you set aside about 4% for private investors. So does that imply that you get most of your business from institutional investors?
No, believe it or not, actually about 20% of our is for private investment. But believe it or not, rare earths have been ignored by institutional money. They're not on, up till now, they haven't been on the radar. And the reason for that is they sort of have a relatively small economic visibility, say, in comparison to gold is a 15 or $17 trillion market cap, right? Rare earths is 15 to 20 billion, but they're also complicated. They might be going into the engine of an F-35 fighter jet. They might be going into a nuclear submarine. So the chain of custody is really, really important. Like you could find somebody or anybody listen, might find some guy in China right now, if they Google after, who'll sell them some gallium. But unless you're a hobbyist and you just want to look at it, you're not going to be able to resell it, Or alternatively, if I was just sort of a crazy Irish man in Tipperary and we weren't a supplier, if I was just telling you, yeah, we'll buy them from China and then we'll call up the president and we'll sell them, red flags everywhere. So institutional money has stayed away, but obviously we're getting more interest for the first time from institutional money this year. But also, in Germany they have a term, it's called gute Geschäften, and it basically means making good business together, right? And our private investors are making good business with us on the supply side. So we don't want one particular investor or institution to become too strategic either. You know what I mean? So we prefer to be working, we've minimum investment is $10,000, but we have clients who have, half a million, a million, maybe 5 million. But the key thing is the chain of custody. They have to be, unless they're in a sort of a registered location, nobody will buy them. Boeing, Airbus, Ford, because again, they could be in an F-35 fighter jet or a Boeing aircraft.
For the investors listening to this, the millions, hundreds of millions listening to the Dre and Smiley podcast.
That's right.
The question, do they have to be accredited investors, or is it just normal people, or is there any sort of criteria you have to be to invest in rare earth
Yeah,
metals?
I don't know any normal people, Smiley. If you ever meet one, let me know. Um, Seriously, like, right? But no, it's open to all. And the reason for that is Europe is just like the US, where metals is not a regulated industry. Now that can be a very good thing and a bad thing. It means you got to be very, very careful. But truthfully, yeah, it's not regulated. In some countries it is. So anybody can buy or sell metal. So minimum investment is 10,000. We encourage clients to start small, a position where they're comfortable and build that position over time. But I just want to tell you something that's really, really important, right? I want to tell you what the investment strategy is and what it is. And I'll give you some very quick recent examples because this is the key thing, right? Um, on a normal day, there's demand for these metals, right? I mean, you look, many new iPhones are being bought over the Christmas and that. We've also got developing nations, hundreds of millions of people coming into the middle class, that will buy all the new stuff. We've resource nationalism, and we have these rare metals there's two sort of supply constraints. One is China, but two is byproduct recovery. So let's say indium, I use as an example, you can swipe your phone because of indium, right? Or no, I'll give you a real example. When we went into lockdown, terbium went up 500% in 3 years. Why did that happen? Because it's needed in computer chips. And when we went into lockdown, the whole world was working from home. There was a massive demand, an increase in demand for laptops, home computers. but the supply could not be increased because it was determined by byproduct recovery, right? Then when we came out of lockdown, hafnium went up 250% in 18 months. Hafnium, that's because Boeing and Airbus were back in business and started ordering planes again. Same thing again, byproduct recovery. What we tell our investors is buy these raw materials, keep them for 3 or 5 years, and every cycle there will be scarcity driven price increases. And when that happens, we'll want to buy them back for you because you're helping us build an inventory for when, like, when the tide is out, if you want to put it that way. So that's what we mean by making good business together. And then a most recent example is in April, and America announced these tariffs. China retaliated with tariffs. Also, what a lot of people didn't see is China restricted the export of dysprosium, terbium, gallium, and germanium. And all of our clients right now, we're offering them. We started in April. We offer when there's a shortage, we offer premium prices. That's what I'm trying to say. Is if people are patient, they get to know us, they do their due diligence, they see we're the real deal. Come to the vault, or actually, we have some people come and making a video from America, so you might see more of it about us in the US, and we may well have a partner in the US very, very soon. I don't know what else you guys do, but you never know. You might. I'm sure you know entrepreneurs. If you know somebody in metals or somebody interested in somebody maybe who already works with private investors, this is something for them to look at as a possible business. Like, I mean, obviously, if somebody's going to do it as a business, they'll come over and they'll say, okay, no shit. I mean, excuse my French. These guys have, $500 million worth of raw materials here. So yeah,
This is super fascinating. So before we get into Final Four, how can let's like you said, there might be someone listening that wants to get in. How can what they find you? What's your website? Do you have any documented books or videos, YouTube channels? Someone who's listening today is like, man, I really want to get into this rare earth metals because I don't mind waiting 3 to 5 years. I have some liquidity I could put in there and let it grow to get some multiples of my money. What would the first person who has zero interest, not interest, zero knowledge in rare earth, but they listen to the Dre and Smiley podcast, what is step one, step two, step three before they make that call to Lewis?
okay, I would go to definitely strategicmetalsinvest.com, which is our website, and it's a wealth of information. It really is. It really, really is. Honestly, they can first of all they leave their email and phone number. They get a brochure. Start with that, and if they like what they see and they read there, they can contact me via email or we'd stay in touch. We'd usually set up a presentation, no obligation, of course. We give them a presentation, and then if they want to investigate further after that, we give them a password to the due diligence portal. The website is really, we put out good educational stuff all the time, and it's sort of a quick study. It's economics 101, isn't it? We've got demand increasing. I don't think even my mother-in-law would argue demand is going to increase for these products, right?
Right.
And we have supply where they're scarce in production and one country sort of dominates the market. So, when you have that, you have a possibility of making a profit.
Nice, nice. So, two quick questions for you. One is, what's next for you?
Good question. Wow, Dre. Nobody's ever asked me that. My missus isn't here. I need to. Well, you know, we're just at the beginning of this, and like this business started in 1999, so it's 25 years on the supply side. So, and we've built up a global reputation. Like we're a tier one supplier to BMW, to Siemens Germany. You know, if you're a tier one supplier to someone like BMW, what that means is they're buying metals from you every month, and they also audit you once a year. So the last 5 years have even taken us by surprise, and our business is literally doubling on the industry side. So what's next is we don't have one partner in North America. So we've only just opened it up in the last few years and we're inviting people. So the next step is to have, you know, in Europe, we're doing about 40 to 50 million with private investors. If we're doing that in Europe, I know we can do that in America. But I think people need to have an American on this podcast, who's been to the vault. You know what I mean? Because, if I was an American, I'd be going, hold on, he's Irish and the metals are in Germany. I would be the same. This sounds very sketchy, right? It's not. The next step is to get a good partner. Like I said to you, I don't want to confuse the topic. I'm talking about private investment. But if you know people who are entrepreneurial, who are curious, who work with private investors, all they need to do is invest in a trip to Frankfurt, and I guarantee they'll come back knowing this is the real deal.
All right. Sounds good. Sounds good. What's one thing that we didn't ask you that we should have asked you?
You know something? I was sort of, you really just follow. I mean, you were obviously listening to me because each time I answered, you sort of went into the next step, and you certainly asked me some stuff I hadn't been asked before. So I don't even know at this time. It might come to me later, but what would I say? Is there anything you didn't ask me? There really isn't. No, fair play to you. Well done, 100%.
Great. Sounds good. So now we're going to kick off the final four here. Some high tech. All right. So first question in the final four is, what's the best compliment that you've ever received?
My goodness. I think the odd time some people have said to me, doesn't happen all the time, that they can be completely themselves in my company.
I can see that.
Here's one for you, Lewis. What's the biggest risk you ever taken and why?
Immigration. I left Dublin at 19 years of age. At the time, we had the troubles in Ireland. On the surface, we had a sectarian war, Catholic against Protestant, which it wasn't at all. It was about identity, the Brits and oppression. Where I grew up, you either ended up in the IRA, on heroin, drinking, or an ODC, an ordinary decent criminal. And my mother was lucky enough to say to me, "Get out." And off I went, and I went to Europe, ended up in Germany, and stayed there for 8 years. And I didn't know one person in the country. And I ended up working for an American company, actually selling cars to the U.S. military. And I came to Panama. I didn't know one person here. I'll tell you, I came to Panama and did the same thing, and it's a great adventure. Fortunately, I met my wife in the first 6 months.
What's one thing that never fails to make you laugh?
Funny people, I love people with a sense of humor. Not everybody has a sense of humor. Just that. I think people who've been struggle, always have humor and just have this energy that's powerful.
Awesome. Well, Lewis, the last final four question, alive or dead, who would you want to spend 24 hours with and why?
I'd say Bobby Sands, who was an Irish IRA man who died on hunger strike in the 1980s, and Malcolm X. Bobby Sands died on hunger strike because during the 1980s, Margaret Thatcher decided to criminalize the IRA, and said, they were Irish. One man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist, right? So she decided to criminalize, and she wouldn't let them. They refused to wear prison uniforms, and um, um, the IRA already had a thing. Their motto in their fight against oppression was, "It's not how much you can sort of inflict; it's how much you can take." Is how you win. And then Malcolm X, because of the transformation, I think all of us have to go through a type of awakening. Anybody who sort of comes out the other side and then is helping other people with what they've come through.
So I gotta tell you, Lewis, Smiley and I were researching you. We are both wondering, like, rare earth metals. That's interesting. It's an area we hadn't really explored in depth. What I appreciate about having you on the podcast is that I feel like I have a clear understanding of the opportunities there for investing, as well as just what they are in general. So what we'll do is we'll put a link to your site on our podcast on this episode's show notes. So for those that are watching and listening and have an interest in learning more and potentially maybe investing, or more importantly, perhaps becoming a North American partner with you, they can know where to find you and how to connect with you. Lewis, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Lewis.
Gentlemen, an absolute pleasure. Happy New Year to you. Thank you very much.